content over everything.
No, it was a third one.
The third one after the
The
Maya.
only problem is,
What was the first
it's
one?
like there's a very Eurocentric.
So what's Eurocentric?
No, I'm saying when people say, "Oh, Africa hasn't done anything,"
Oh.
it's a very Eurocentric kind of reading of history.
That's what most people think of Africa.
Because when you think about it, when we go back to like the first century, there was no England as we know it.
No, there was.
It existed, but I'm saying the nation that we know it was conquered by the Roman Empire. They had a little colony. They named the city London, Londinium. So it's like the center of the world moved from kind of Turkey or Asia Minor to Western Europe now.
My
that's
argument
kind
is
of
counter
the
to the Eurocentric perception of Africa, because of the fact that they had to justify the mistreatment of black people. Don't let them read. They're not 3/5 of a human being. So when it was shown that actually, from up until the 16th century, they had a large empire in West Africa. There were ruins in Zimbabwe, which people today still try and say that no, the people of Zimbabwe didn't build it. And even in like places like Axum, where they, large cities. So and I understand slavery has always existed, but the problem with it is it's the fact that it came with this idea of black people being essential like Untermensch in a way. And that's why the transatlantic slave trade is an important part of black history and its uniqueness. So when people look at like the Indus River Valley civilizations and their ruins, like no one can translate their script, but nobody doubts that people of modern day Pakistan built it. No one doubts this, unless you're Jamie, where you think it was built by whites. So,
but yeah, well, what's the?
I understand what you're saying. It's like they're saying, no, this couldn't have been built by these people because of slavery.
So they had to have an excuse. But it's like a religion. You can't just go, well, we've been doing this religion for a good half a millennia. We can't just give up on it now, and it's still in the minds of a lot of people.
Well, it's a strange thing. It's like, have you ever seen the Teotihuacan ruins in Mexico?
The who?
It's called Teotihuacan. It's
like the Aztecs?
Amazing. It's this amazing pyramid structure that was built in Mexico. No one goes to that location and says that someone didn't.
Not one person. Well, except for
But
Jamie.
who was it built by? The Aztecs, the Mayans,
See,
the Etruscans?
nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Tlaxcalans?
Well, obviously, they were still building it in
was
Columbus.
plenty of different
Aztec
civilizations
civilization.
I know. I just call them South American.
I saw
Amerindian.
this for the first time
Mesoamerican.
recently.
You know what's weird is the theory that Kingston had about how
the
you could
hell
only build civilization if you
did
lived
people
in the cold parts.
Like it was to the point
South
where I thought
American
to myself, this
civilization
actually
was
looked.
north and
It was on that
they were
National
just complete
Geographic.
nomads running about the place.
Because in North
Forget the
America,
thing. I was just
I
thinking
would
to
say
myself,
the climate
the architectural
it wasn't
ability
as
of these
easy
people.
to actually build something. In
This
Mesoamerica,
is,
there were lots of resources, blah
450
blah blah. You could
BC.
build something.
That's kind of
Really recent.
yeah.
Guys, you want some bread?
Predate that.
No, thank you. Actually, yeah, I might have
Consensus
some.
on how they built.
It looks really nice.
There's theories. 5,500. And there's still no consensus on how they did it. Like, there's theories.
He's on a diet.
Let me just show you a quick picture of what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure what the discussion here is about. Nobody's using the Kingston argument.
Could be older, could be younger.
It's aliens?
There are a lot of architectural structures around where we've not
Yeah, no.
Dude,
Oh, it's definitely aliens. Have you seen my head?
Mega Minds.
Yeah, don't I look like an extra from Star Trek? I mean, just a bit of makeup.
Yeah, you do. It's like, come on,
Massive
man.
complex.
Like it's just unbelievable.
Nobody really cares about it.
It's in Mexico City.
Exactly.
It's to the point where I asked myself. Of course, I'm not saying ancient aliens is true, but look at this. What the heck is that?
If our anthropology is correct,
looks unbelievable.
there's only been civilized peoples in that area for about 20,000 years.
Yeah, okay.
Sort of out of Africa, across Europe, that down. So they couldn't be much older than that, but that doesn't make any sense then.
All I'm saying is it is just an unbelievable structure. It's like kind of discovering this amazing kind of architecture structure and just not knowing who built it. It's just there. Yeah, they just left it there. They left no writings. But you just see on the actual kind of temple, you see some of their gods that they display and stuff.
But the thing, set that aside, because that could have been added later.
Yeah, that is true. That you just don't need to know.
How did they move these blocks of stone, hundreds, maybe thousands of tons? For what? It was obviously hugely valuable to them, otherwise they wouldn't bother doing it.
So where? In Egypt or in
All over.
Mesoamerica?
All over. South
Yeah,
South
so
America.
Mesoamerica,
So
Teotihuacan.
it's interesting. So they found basically ruined. They had to carry them on foot. It would actually have to be carried like 8-10 guys one at a time, and it took forever to actually build those structures. It was not.
8 to 10 guys couldn't carry more than a few hundred kilos.
You'll be surprised.
Well, the thing is, we're talking tens, hundreds of tons. So no, the thing is that even if they're rolling them, you couldn't roll more than several tons. I'm thinking. No, 8 to 10 guys. You know, if you had a few hundreds, maybe thousands, then you can roll them. But then, you know, hundreds of tons.
They said around 200,000 people lived there at its peak.
Yeah, but I mean,
It's an estimation.
yeah, but if you put a few hundred tons on the wooden rollers, you'll have sawdust in no time. It'll just grind to nothing.
Because for me, I think that obviously the Egyptian pyramids, based on the location, are just
It sounds like a
an outward wonder of the world.
Do you remember that when we
But
just didn't
this
take it? I didn't think
Teotihuacan
it was
construction, for me, it just seems so unusual. It just seems so unusual to me when I saw it. Like, I've seen the pyramids and I was like, but there was just something so strange about not just the actual buildings, the way it was all laid out.
But the thing is, why did they do it? Because they really liked the king? Does that make any sense to you?
They have theories and they say it was part of their kind of ritualistic structure. So they believe they made human sacrifices as well.
But that's a huge spend in resources to build this big pile of stones.
Yeah, but have you been to sort of the Aswan, southern part of Egypt? I mean, you've seen the pyramids in Cairo, in Gaza.
I'm going to go and see it in person, but I've seen it on the internet.
So well, it's when you're there, because even though I'm Egyptian and I've only ever seen them like in person fairly recently, the sense of scale is the first thing that hits you. Like you're looking at it in a picture and you think, oh, that looks awesome, but then you're standing there and you're this tiny thing, and you look up above and you see the paint is still blue that was put 4,000 years ago, and the paint is still there.
And some bloke did that.
That's something I find so fascinating. The sculpture, the level of sculptural ability. Because for me, for a long time, I had this perception that real sculpture at the highest level began in the 15th century during the Renaissance. That was my kind of initial understanding. It's not true. But then I started to see Babylonian Empire and some of their sculpture. Then I started to see Egyptian.
These are refinements on refinements on refinements.
So you can also see though that people in the 15th century achieved that level because they kind of had a blueprint of things to work from already.
They had tools. I mean, 5,500 years ago, they didn't have steel.
And also you have to recognize the differences, like what constitutes art changes, because the Renaissance were very much about depicting nature in as accurate a form as possible, whereas ancient art is closer to the abstract style, where they're just trying to depict the symbol and how things feel and
I'll
look.
show you this picture. It's in the British Museum.
You've seen the pyramids up close.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying there's one which is like really high quality, the others are sort of knockoffs? Would that be fair?
I've seen that before.
Sorry, there's a lot. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen it. That's a Persian. It's a Persian Sphinx.
Need a Persian. Can you see it?
Yeah.
That's in the British Museum. I saw that, and the level of detail is probably twice the size of you in terms of height.
Yeah.
And it is the most realistic depiction of like an animal that I've ever seen in my life, and it was made like 2,500 years ago.
So in Luxor, the Temple of Luxor, they have like 60 of them arranged in two columns, just sitting there. And basically, if you were the procession of the king at the time, you'd have to walk through them. So if anything, the reason they would build the architecture that big is to inspire awe in the people coming in.
And even as a king.
Even as a king. And the interesting one of the largest sculptures you're going to see in Egypt is on the wall of the Temple of Ramesses, and it's really a giant picture of Ramesses holding a bunch of prisoners with a bat above his head about to kill them. So this thing is a political statement. Any foreigner coming can see that shit all the way over there.
From afar, exactly.
And then like, don't mess with these people. They're going to fuck us up.
That's what this is all about. You build big monuments to essentially say to your potential opponents, don't fuck with me. I got rocks in my hat. I'm wealthy. Don't piss me off.
These people built that. Don't mess with us.
Exactly.
But
The thing is, you don't want to have
inspires me.
you don't want to have to go there, so you make the statement. It's a bit like the military, what do you call it? Exhibitions and this sort of thing. Look how much shit we got. But you don't actually want to do it, because then you're into high spend, capital and blood. And
because sometimes, obviously, we're in the technological age, industrial revolution. There's this kind of perception that we are the most advanced civilization in history.
What's your metric?
This is what I'm trying to say. But when you go back, and you start looking at some of the accomplishments of some of these civilizations, you start to realize, my goodness, they may not have had technological excellence because of the fact that a lot of these places weren't in close proximity. So, for example, the printing press was developed in Germany, and then that technology was shared amongst other nations, whereas before, if Germany didn't share the technology of the printing press, they would have advanced heavily in terms of their academic literature, whereas the rest of the world would have been stuck. Until they learn how to do it.
But the thing is, this is like for instance, Venice. They could make glass, and it was the ability to make glass was very closely guarded under pain of death. What was the other ones? Horology, timekeeping. We had chronometers, so we could navigate. It hobbled the rest of the world because we could, they couldn't.
No, but it's like, and in a lot of instances, nations in the past didn't share their accomplishments with other nations.
No, this was high tech. You think about it, like a clock. 500 years ago, that was cutting edge.
So the fact that we live in a world now where people actively share technology, information, ideas, discoveries, it has enabled kind of the world collectively to advance much further.
They'll share it if you've got the money.
Yeah, of course, if you're trying to develop high-level technology, but I mean, even as simple as, for example, the ability to read, the ability to write, that in itself has been a skill that's been shared amongst many nations now over time.
And these days also, it's not, so if you go back to the 1950s, for example, when Japan was starting to redevelop its industries after the war, so the Americans and the European countries didn't share their tech. They would buy, the Japanese would buy and try to reverse engineer and come up with their own examples. And Japan and South Korea were interesting because they were very protectionist in their industry, but at the same time they were different from other protectionist countries because they were aiming to be competitive in the foreign market, not in the local market. So even the pipes that they had to produce, it's like, look, if I'm wearing a white shirt and I handle the pipes, bullshit.
Rubbish.
Bullshit.
Wherever you said
bullshit. Nice bandana.
I do think it's interesting.
But so the term sharing now because we've distributed our industry, so different specializations all over the world, so you have to kind of share IP to get things done. But even as far back as the 50s and 60s, even the Cold War, I remember in like the 70s and 80s, my father was telling me a story about if you're going to buy an American computer, you had to sign in a contract that you can't share the components with East Germany.
East Germany,
and it's interesting that the Americans during the Cold War invented solid-state technology so they can build computers small enough to fit in submarines and put on missiles to develop a deterrent. The Russians, until the 60s, were still using transistors and vacuum tubes.
But there was a lot of time where, kind of in the kind of space race, Russia was really driving the main technology. So, like, America were using Russian crafts and stuff like that.
So it's interesting you say that because there is yes and no. So you're right. The Russians were ahead when it came to launching equipment into outer space, but the finery of the tech itself, the Americans mastered better than the Russians. And the proof is in the pudding. The first guidance computer was put on the Minuteman, was a 30-kilogram computer. I think it was called D17B. It's a 30-kilogram computer, and it's less than your mobile phone. It's like a really shitty piece of equipment, but it was good enough to land a missile within 2 kilometers of a target in Russia. It's pretty unbelievable. The Russians didn't have that capability. They were much more loose. We're just going to land somewhere in a city, whereas the Americans were much more accurate. And to make it more interesting, the Americans also decided to launch from submarines. That was the Polaris program. Again, the computer had to get even smaller because now they had to fit the damn thing in the submarine. And they had to invent GPS to be able to locate where the submarine is and land it in Russia. So the definition of advanced are two different things. The Russians were better at putting bigger things in space. The Americans were better at making them more accurate.
I want to ask a question. Like, what is your perception of the whole concept of UFOs? And I'm asking this not as someone who is like a UFO believer or anything, but just more like a genuine question. Specifically, the technology itself. I'm not saying aliens.
No,
I'm saying the actual technology. What do you think about it?
I think if you look at the maths, I think they said there should be about 750,000 intelligent species in existence now
in the universe.
I think if they could get here, they'd be smart enough to know to leave us alone. Because whoever got hold of it, they would just have an absolute shit show.
Because I've been kind of following like some updates. So I saw this footage that was released by the Pentagon about air fighter pilots discovering, they call it like a tic tac in one case, but there was basically footage of them seeing a legitimate UFO making maneuvers that they were effectively impossible.
Are they on film?
On film, on video.
I mean, I've certainly seen things I can't explain.
No, they were officially released by the Pentagon. So the Pentagon themselves said, we discovered, we were flying on the east coast of America, and we discovered these, video footage of these anomalies, and it was making maneuvers that were just impossible. Like, do you know what I mean? So, for example, like a fire rocket is firing exhaust out in one direction, whereas the UFOs like this, it would go one way, stop, go another way, stop, go. It was just moving in a way that was basically
impossible. The thing is, are you sure there isn't like a mirror rattling around in the back of his camera?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not impossible.
That was actually a police report where a policeman was reporting, I've got an unidentified flying object and it's moving horizontally across the sky, and it turns out it was him just driving.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this over Israel.
The footage was produced by a high-speed camera that was attached to kind of the air fighter jets. So they're flying at like hundreds of miles an hour, and they can see this thing moving.
I mean, for instance, it could be an ice crystal on the lens or something like that. I mean, I do a bit of machine vision and this sort of thing, so you do get anomalies which got no way of explaining.
So here's an interesting one for you. There were flat Earth hoaxers talking about the SpaceX program, the launch that Elon Musk did the other day, and they were looking at the footage. Bear with me. I'm not a flat earther, but I'm just telling you something. They in the footage, they thought they found a rat on the fuselage as it was in low Earth orbit. So we're talking about a fuselage that's at close to 1,000 degrees, and there was a mouse that walked across it. That's what the video showed. But it's interesting. It's like, this is a mouse. This whole thing is fake. Blah blah blah. But then they took the footage from the beginning of the launch all the way to the end, and it's interesting that there's condensation that forms on it, and it just moves along the thing, moves along the fuselage. So again, something moved, they interpreted it to be a mouse, but if they had seen the entire footage, like all 30 minutes of it, no, it's the condensation, it solidifies, and then it slides off.
Okay.
So again, it's like someone like, look at the footage, there's a mouse.
Yeah.
But if it's 1,000 degrees, how's it condensation? That would just sublimed off.
When it gets into, so it's an interesting fact that here's an interesting part. The behavior of water when we're talking about low Earth orbits, so we're talking extreme cold and extreme heat at the same time, it starts to exhibit very unusual properties.
It does, but if the fuselage is 1,000 degrees, you're not going to get condensation.
What I take from it is this. For me, I'm not really interested in the concept of aliens, not at all. But I think, here's how I view this whole UFO thing personally, is this. Why couldn't there be some sort of organization, secret government program that has been able to create advanced air fighter technology or aircrafts that they just haven't declared to the scientific world? And all they're doing is just testing these things, and people are catching these things on camera.
Russia's supposed to have hypersonic missiles. Was it Mach 14 or something? I don't know.
So for me, it's like when I think of the actual technology, I actually personally think that there is technology that exists, because we've actually got some video footage of it. You can argue, you can make the argument that hasn't been declared to the mainstream public. That's what I believe. I don't believe any of these UFO things are from outer space or anything. I just think these are being controlled by people who have access, or they've cracked some sort of higher level aircraft, advanced aircraft technology, and they're just testing it. That's what it is. I think UFOs it's more like a cover story.
Probably.
That's what I think.
Well, let me
hidden in plain sight.
But the actual technology itself, it's like, for example, if you took
it's like movement, it's not prostitution.
a fighter jet back into the 15th or 1000 AD, they're going to be like, what the hell is this?
Even beginning of the century.
You know what I mean? Like, people,
1900s.
You're going to be looking at it like, this is up from out of this world. Like, who is this spaceman in this suit? You know what I mean? So for me, I view it that way. This has been created by human beings, but it just hasn't been declared to mainstream. That's what I believe. That's the only reason I was asking, because I'm not interested in aliens or anything. I'm interested in the technology, if it exists or not.
I get where you're coming from, but I'd have to challenge that in one way. Not that I think you're wrong, not that I think it's out of the question, But again,
it's a theory, of course. What I'm saying is not a fact.
no, of course.
It's a hypothesis.
We're speculating. But if you,
there must be out there. There must be secret programs out there being tested,
But think
and
about
they'll
it this
unwrap
way.
them when they're ready.
But think about it this way. If we're talking, say, U.S. government, right? If you look at all of the weapons that they've developed recently, we're talking like the Osprey program, the F-35, the Zumwalt-class destroyers, and all of those. If you look at the process that they were designed and the number of people that had to go and build and design them, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people and jobs distributed across multiple different contractors and multiple different technologies. It's not a small job. How long do you think all of those people could keep it a secret? And how long? And here's the thing: the Osprey, the two-winged, the two-rotor helicopter that you see on TV, that took about 18 years to develop, and the number of fuck-ups that it had to go through before it could actually work were huge. F-35.
For
to this
example, you're
day.
speaking about publicly declared information. This is what I mean.
That's the thing. It's
So we can only access things that have been made available.
yes, but
That's
again,
the key point I'm trying to
I know, but at the same time, when you think about the number of people needed to keep it a secret, it's just too large. And if it's such a unique technology, there's going to be a patent. There's going to be something somewhere that points to this is possible. And your position wouldn't be so much a theory, but look, we know we can develop tech that can do this. This patent makes it possible. Why isn't this made out of that?
But this is where I would say, this is where the video footage comes into it.
Yeah.
But the problem is, this is the biggest issue with this whole thing. There were so many people who were like, oh my days, I saw a balloon in the sky, it's a UFO. Like, that is the issue.
Yeah.
Like, that is the problem. It's like everyone's saying, oh, you know, it was a windy day. We're not relying on that. We need hard evidence. And I'm saying,
The thing is,
in my
what is
opinion,
hard evidence? Does that actually? Do you have to have the aircraft? You just footage of it? 'Cause, I mean,
It's true, it's
you
true.
make up whatever footage you like.
Here's what I'll say. What do you think of this then? Okay. I'll show it to both of you.
Yeah, I'll come around.
I'm saying, what do you think of this? Okay? One second.
We need a better ideology in the West because the ideology of the West.
It's not a good video. You can't see it. Yeah, here we go. It's not a wrong video. Okay.
Tell me why.
You see it?
They're tracking some sort of.
Yeah, they're tracking something in the sky. Something's moving. This is a high-speed camera.
Well, it looks like infrared image, which is by definition not a high-speed camera. But anyway,
And then it starts to. Oh, they didn't show the full footage. Oh, it's annoying.
I mean, infrared cameras are very slow. Civilian versions in the West are limited to, I think, 9 frames a second. I think the military go a lot higher, but they're not high speed. Not in the
What I'm
hundreds of
saying,
thousands.
what is that? It's moved and it starts to turn. It's turning. Can you see it? It's turning.
Well, the thing is,
What is that?
but the thing is, image is turning. I mean, you can just pop the camera mount. It looks like,
Okay.
you know.
So, no, but what I'm saying, to me, that's not hard evidence of anything. That's not proof of anything. I'm not saying, it's an unidentified object that's moving in the sky. Who knows what it is? But what I'm saying is, until there's hard evidence, it's always going to be speculation.
It's, the key's in the name. It's unidentified.
Yeah, we don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is.
We have no idea what it is. We have no idea what it is. So, I don't know. I just think that, personally, what would be most interesting to me, though, is if I hate saying the word UFO. I hate that word because it just sounds.
Well, it's
if there was some sort of advanced aircraft that existed, but it wasn't created by us, meaning our civilization, it was created by an ancient civilization. That would be interesting. That would be so fascinating for me. No proof. No proof. That would be fascinating.
What do you mean aircraft? You mean a balloon? Is that an aircraft? Does it have to be powered? A glider, maybe?
But again, so the theory of the UFOs is that it's based on gravitational propulsion. What it means basically is the actual aircraft creates its own gravitational field, which carries it up and down. That's what enables it to move around.
So essentially, they've completely mastered
So basically, from the pilot's position, he's not actually moving, but he's literally moving the universe around him.
Yeah, just after the maths.
Yeah.
Because I watched this documentary about a guy called Bob Lazar. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah. Oh no, not him. Oh God.
I'm not saying I believe what he's saying.
Oh yeah.
Not at all. I'm not saying that. His name's Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar.
I'm not saying I believe what he's saying at all. But what I'm saying is some of the stuff he said was interesting to me. Just some of the theories about, he's describing how the reactor created its own gravitational field, which carried the aircraft. That's the reason why it was able to move around.
So the thing is, we've essentially got to chuck all of our physics out the window.
Exactly.
No, but to be fair, there was the Area 51 myths was literally propagated by the Department of Defense to hide the fact that they were building. We know what they were building. They were building B-2 bombers, fixed-wing aircraft, and the predecessor of that, the F-117 Phantom. You've probably seen pictures of it during the Gulf War. That black triangular jet. Yeah. So obviously, someone looking at that thing would think, "Holy fuck, what is that?"
That's a question.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. You can't really rely on eyewitness testimony when it comes down to
you
these
can.
kind of things. You've got to go with hard evidence. You've got to go with something that's concrete. And with every single thing I've looked at, nothing is concrete. No one can say, it's just, I saw this, or you need to trust me.
Because if we're talking human engineering, if we're talking a modern project,
there should be some sort of evidence.
There's going to be something,
something.
Yeah.
The engineering plans, something.
The schematics is the U.S. government aren't going to be spending money on top secret stuff. There's going to be a paper trail. Whether it's the U.S. government, whether it's Russia, and it's like, okay, I get it. It's not going to be public now. You're not going to find out about it now. But like 5-6 years from now, it's like, holy shit, that thing was real.
But when you're actually working in the industry, you're making this part. It's just a part. It's a part. You have no idea what it's for. The guy next to you making something completely different. It's the other end. One's a sharp end, one's a blunt end.
So definitely at sort of the lower tier. But again, have you ever tried to compartmentalize a small project? It's pretty hard to do. And it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, especially if you don't have sort of synergy amongst it. It kind of falls apart.
Everyone's working on their own component. But if you don't have any kind of understanding of where it's going to, how can you make adjustments?
And to make matters worse, that's a lot of legwork for you as the manager, because you're the one with all the information of your head. You have to talk the specs to everyone separately. And if you ever spoken to like Fortune X100, they're not hands-on people. No. Guys like George W. Bush or like the head of the CIA or whatever, they're not like, oh, I'm going to get into the thick of it.
They just read reports.
Yeah,
they just read reports. That's it.
They just look at the bottom.
So who's in the control here?
This is where the Russians were far better than the Americans, because essentially the architect, if you like, gave the engineers, the guys on the machine tools, this is what I want, go and make it for me, and they did. Whereas the Americans went the other route. They came down completely prescriptive. This is exactly what I want. And if it doesn't work, the guys making it say, that's what you wanted. This is what's so difficult, especially trying to re-engineer some of the Russian stuff, because they make a lot of the really advanced rocket engines.
That's one thing I find kind of strange, how people struggle to re-engineer something when you have the full component. You have all that.
The thing is, you're taking everything. You're taking materials to the absolute limit. Okay, and you're working with some really strange materials like titanium. You ever try to machine that stuff? It's like machining bubble gum.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
So for example, the Russians may have developed some sort of process that actually works very efficiently.
Yeah. The thing is,
but the Americans have to start from scratch. They don't have that.
Then take that one to the edge, and take this one to the edge.
They got to figure out how to
mess up any along the line, you throw it all away.
And here's what's really going to bake your noodle.
It's just like, for example, me saying, okay, here's a Ferrari, go make one. No. What I mean is, we're going to give you the car.
Yeah, okay.
Go and make it.
Yeah, you can make the engine.
You don't have the factory though. You got to build all the materials. And everything.
You can make the engine. You can make the transmission. But I've got to make the tires. Any one of us messes up, we got nothing.
Yep.
Exactly.
And to make matters worse, just because technology progresses doesn't mean you forget useful things in the past. And there was a classical example of scurvy. Vitamin C deficiency in ships.
Yeah.
So the British, Great Britain was a naval superpower largely because they managed scurvy better than most of the other navies. So they could afford to put their sailors out to sea for weeks and months at a time without getting vitamin C deficiency. And Britain was the best at that. And then what happened was the steamship got invented. So now that there's a steamship, and these long journeys became a thing of the past. No one used to travel for weeks at a time until people started scouting the Antarctic. And suddenly, people were starting to get scurvy in the Antarctic because they'd forgotten how to manage scurvy, and all of that learning was lost because it's been like 50, 60 years.
We can't make wagon wheels anymore. We don't need them.
Exactly. So that latent knowledge, that implicit understanding. And here's the fucked up thing: vitamin C was only identified in the 1930s. It was 1936 when Linus Pauling identified it. So we were going on the blind with scurvy and all of these diseases until like the 1930s, and we didn't figure it out. And even though we managed it very well for centuries at a time, all of a sudden we forgot about it. So yeah, I totally get it. Some guy in the 50s knew how to build like a unique fuselage that we can't do anymore because we forgot how to do it. No one wrote it down.
Because at the time it was ubiquitous. You could just do it. It's like the architecture in South America. You could build these rocks that are perfectly fitting, but everybody could do it. So why write it down?
It's true. No, but it's like, when I look at places like the kind of Asia, like Japan and China, and I see some of the architectural structures they build, and I just sit down and think, man, how do these guys build this? Because not only when you see the kind of unique buildings, it has a kind of general structure, whereas the Japanese one has like a curve. They use stone, they use wood as well. They use a lot of wood.
Yeah.
The Greeks
didn't use any nails.
That's
Japanese never used nails.
They use mortar as well. They use mortar, but the thing is, the Greeks didn't really use wood in the actual building of the actual building itself. They may have put it on the floor, for example, but they didn't actually build it into the actual house. Whereas the Japanese use both wood and stone and mortar to.
Did they have termites?
I don't know what kind of weather they have in
some parts. So in the north, it's very cold.
That's the reason why. That's why these are all American houses.
No, so
you've got something cool.
So the Japanese peninsula is really interesting because if you go to the north, it's very cold. It's very similar to Russia. But then you go to further south, it's very tropical. It's sort of like the Philippines, and you've got pretty much everything in between. So
I really feel that the weather of a nation really affected the way they built their architecture. I really believe that, because when you look at the Mediterranean weather, the houses look a certain way. When you go to Africa, they didn't really build houses of stones because it would have been too hot. There would have been way too much insulation in the actual home if they built homes full of stones, for example. So it's like it really influences the way people build. I believe.
Absolutely.
The weather. That's a huge effect.
No, so if you go to the southern parts of Japan, like Kyushu, they would build the house on an elevated, like the house was built in, was put on pillars, so the house wasn't on the ground floor. But you go to sort of north, Hokkaido and places like that, where you had the Ainu, the native peoples, they would build straight on the floor, because again, it's just a completely different way of living. So no, you're spot on.
I think that's one thing that's kind of fascinated me as I got older, and you just start to see the differences in architecture. If you go to Israel, you see a certain kind of architecture because of the old city. Then you go to Japan, Asia, then you see Africa in some respects, then you go to South America, and you realize, my goodness, there was just this kind of this is before everything was connected. There was just this universal understanding. We need to build a home, and everyone had their own style. You go to India,
trying to protect yourself against. Is it just weather, or is it weather and enemies, or is it monsoons,
exactly.
or is it cold?
So that's why the Great Wall of China was built, of course, as well. That's a very spectacular structure.
Great Wall,
Very spectacular. A lot of people died building it over a long time.
It's just made of mud, isn't it? Most of the sort of the intercity place is just made of compacted mud.
It's interesting to me because it's just that kind of universal understanding. That's what it means. Like, as a human being, you have your own little village, and it's fascinating because most of the world was not connected the way it is now. We couldn't access these things via planes. So in many cases, people just kind of went somewhere and were like, what the hell? What is it? What is all this? You know,
I was watching a documentary on some of the architecture in India. Okay, and there's some features made out of pink granite. I think. Okay, but the pink granite was from 600 kilometers away. Okay, so just think about this. The guy in India had to know about this pink granite, so there's obviously some sort of traveling salesman. He wants some pink granite, and by the way, it's coming 600 kilometers. So this is 3,000 years ago. But again, some of the workmanship is just exquisite for no reason. You know, you're carving the back of a figure that no one will ever see. Can never see.
I'm gonna have to end it, guys.
And a lot of the sculpture is actually unbelievably right. The height from the actual sculpture.
ContentCOE everything from your
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen. COE. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. I don't even listen to Sky.
The question is, are we about to go into a second wave of
Man, don't listen
COVID?
to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
I think that's misplaced. I think the whole terminology of second wave is misplaced. It's a virus which spread, as far as we know, the first recorded cases were in China and spread around the world. Now, we know that it didn't originate in China, although most people don't know that.